Hello, we want to present about the waste problem, and I want to start off by talking about which negative sides there are to nuclear waste. First off, there are amount of radioactive that is left from nuclear power plants is very small compared to other methods of generating energy, but it's very expensive and dangerous. The nuclear waste have long half-lives, which means that the waste continues to be radioactive for 1,000 years. This means that if anything happens to the waste cylinders, the radioactive material could leak out. So the nuclear waste disposal is difficult to be stored, and scientists still talk about and discusses this issue because there's no long-term storage solution. Back in time, the waste was thrown in the ocean, but this is no longer implemented, and this stopped because to regard to the climate. Yes. The biggest concerns that people have with the nuclear waste is the effect on animals and the nature. Even though the waste is sealed in drums of steel and cement, the accidents can still occur and leaks also. Nuclear waste can have serious effects on growth, plant growth, example, and it can cause problems for the generation of animal lives and species. The cleanup of nuclear waste is very expensive, and it can have a very negatively impact on those who are involved in cleaning up the radioactive. And the people who are involved do take some risks of getting radiation and can even get sick. Even though they are protected with lead suits that covers the main part of the body in the front, they don't protect the arms and the head from radiation. So when cleaning up, they have to work in teams where only people of a small amount of time clean up, so they shift all the time.
Okay, so I will speak about what evidence about nuclear waste are presented in the documentary and how do people feel about the management of waste from nuclear plants. First of all, I looked at Charles Till, who is an atom physicist, and he speaks about two different types of reactors. He starts off telling us about the breeder reactor and the light water reactor. The breeder reactor is a reactor which breeds plutonium and can recycle it over and over again. And he says that it's a very good reactor for fuel. And he says that at 19 minutes and 13 seconds to 20 minutes and 7 seconds. He speaks about the light water reactor at 19 minutes and 37 to 19 and 42. And here he says that light water reactor is a much simpler reactor but produces more waste. And he explains that this reactor was chosen by the for the submarine by Admiral Rickover. And there's both pros and cons towards this reactor. But it was chosen for a submarine, which isn't that big of a deal, but when you use it for energy reactors and are using for creating energy, then it becomes a problem because it emissions so much waste. And this Admiral Rickover was also the reason why it was chosen as a reactor. Then we have Len Koch, which is an engineer, and he speaks from 2008 to 2026. And he says that we developed a water reactor, but we looked at them as a stepping stone for a real nuclear power, the breeder reactor, as we consider it to be most likely to make a long-ranged future nuclear power. Then we also have Richard Rhodes. He speaks more about the commercial part of having this type of reactor, the light water reactor. And at 2036 and 2054, he speaks about how they were concerned that the Soviet Union would keep up with them in terms of creating new power, and were actually afraid of them stealing their march on the commercial business in Europe, so they launched the reactor earlier than expected, which meant they had to choose a simpler one, which is the light water reactor. And then we have Stuart Brand, and he speaks about how waste is contained and how we are handling it at the moment. And he speaks about that at 1 hour, 11 minutes and 15 seconds to 1 hour, 11 minutes and 45 seconds. And he speaks about how he found that the way people are handling nuclear waste at the moment is quite good, because they put it in these small storages and then park it out in the parking lot. And here stands all the nation's nuclear waste. And it's not causing any problems, he believes, so in that way it's not a problem for him. And he also realized that it was easier to handle the waste, having it on top of ground instead of lower ground, as you could use it as fuel. And that was something that he had to realize and took him some time. So in that way, it tells us about how we can use fuel from the waste and then actually creating new fuel. At last, we have Gwyneth and we have Mark. And Gwyneth speaks about how we can store the waste. And in general, she speaks about how they can stack it in 3 meters height and have it all in a football field. And she also explains that there's only a very small fraction, mainly plutonium, which is long-lived. So most of the waste we have can be contained in a few years and then be safe to dump in another place. And in general, people speak very positively about this waste problem, which isn't really a problem in their opinion. And also, if you look at Linus, Mark Linus, he explains that all of France's nuclear waste can be stored under one floor in one room. So in that way, they're very positive about it and don't see it as a problem that we create as much waste, as it can be used as fuel and be stored quite easily.
Okay, how do people in the documentary present their opinions, and how do the documentary use the semantic techniques to convince us? In the documentary, we hear several interviews. In these interviews, we get presented to different authors, engineers, scientists, and old environmental activists. In the first part of the documentary, we get introduced shortly to some of these people. From 2:11 to 2:30, we hear a view on nuclear power. They use pan camera movement to make him appear as an expert with an important opinion. From 2:31 to 2:52, we hear an interview with a woman who has changed her view on nuclear power. The shot is filmed in wide shot and ends in a close-up to make the situation serious. She wants to prove her point by the zoom effect. Michael Zellenberg is an author that we see from 5042 to 5047. The film for him is in a close-up, and they use pan camera movement, which makes the interview seem very serious and wants us to feel compassionate with him. And why is the current handling of the nuclear waste a problem? There is both solid nuclear waste and a liquid type. If all nuclear waste was solid, it wouldn't be a problem to stack it like Craven said. But that is not the reality. Some of the waste is liquid, which makes it hard to handle. It is highly dangerous to have leaks or to move the waste because of the high radioactivity. The documentary only talk about the easy waste. They do not handle the topic of liquid, which also is a common type of waste.
And finding places to store the waste is also an important part of the topic. A thing that may not be thought about is the risk of natural hazards, like in Fukushima. Placing waste in an area with lots of earthquakes is dangerous, as the containers might start to leak radioactive waste, and that could harm the popularity. Yes, and then we have some sources, and we use the Conserve Energy Future and Green Tumble, and of course the documentary Pandora's Promise by Robert Stone. Thank you.